Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us. Goodness, we can see lots of conversation going on already. Hi to lots of people. Thank you. That's really nice to see everyone here. Okay, so we are carrying on with this crazy project of ours. We're doing chapters 14 and 15 today. There's more people. Hey, Trish, John, Nancy, Adato, goodness, everyone, and Christopher's here as well. Hope you're feeling better soon. We're going to do chapters 14 and 15, like I just said. That's all going to be about multi-dimensional reality.
And the nature of
First thing in the morning.
Yeah. Simple subject, straight up in the morning.
Easy, no problem. And then heterodyning afterwards.
Just to make it more interesting.
Yeah, so we've had coffee. Hope you have too. But we've got a question up here already. So just before we go into that, I'll just say, we definitely do need more coffee, John. That's absolutely true. You can ask us questions about what we're talking about as we go along.
Or anything, really.
It doesn't need to be about chapters 14 and 15. In fact, it doesn't even need to be specifically about the primer. So if there is something that just comes to mind as we go along, just jump in there. Just help us out by writing question in capital letters, just because whilst we've got a lot of chitter chatter in the chat box, which is awesome, it just helps us identify the questions. So, right. Phew, housekeeping done. Chris says, do you want me to read that out to you?
Yeah.
His question is, do the Zetas know the alphabet and can they read and write? We actually thought that was a really good question.
I've not... I'll give you an example of the way the Zetas think. Somebody once asked them, what's 1 + 1? And they said 1. And the person said, no, it's 2. And the Zeta said, well, if you get 2 glasses of water and pour them together, that's 1 glass of water. And so from their perspective, they have a different type of belief structure towards things. Now, with the alphabet, when they first started speaking through me in sentences, the sentences came through backwards.
Yeah.
And they didn't realise that the sentences were backwards. That was the thing. So
I think that's brilliant.
That's pretty interesting concept. So I'm not sure if they know what A, B, C, and D mean. They may have some ability to translate what that means, but it would also, like, from their perspective, everything's based around geometry and symbols. And so I just don't think that they would know if you said, spell this word. I'm not sure if they'd know how to spell that word. I think they've got technology that supports their transition, for contact.
I remember asking them when I asked them a question, did they understand my question word for word as spoken in the human language? And they said no. They understood the question by its energetic
referencing.
Yeah. So I would suggest that probably it's all based around that.
The other thing is so let's say I'm in trance and the Zetas are talking through me and you ask a question, they'll see the whole range of answers.
Yeah.
And then they'll choose the one which holds what they perceive to be the most weight, or the perception of the person asking the question, their ability to understand the answer.
And which is amusing for me because my brain doesn't do science or maths or numbers at all. So they tried to give me a physics lesson once and I don't think they'll ever try and do it again. I had to say to them, okay, imagine I'm about 5 human years old and give that information to me again. And one more time.
Another time.
It was I found it hilarious. They probably found it very frustrating. Yeah, okay. So all right. So this, like I said, this is going to be based around chapters 14 and 15. And some of it's kind of inevitably covered before, but we'll try and take it in a slightly different direction. So the Zetas in this first chapter are talking about, and I'm reading my question off to the side, about the multi-dimensional nature of vibration. What does this actually mean in English, please?
So basically they're talking about the vibrational structure of fabric, and the fabric is basically energy. And so when we talk about three-dimensional structures, that's where we all are at this point. But of course, we also bleed through into other dimensional aspects. So when you're asleep, you'll astral, or you can astral when you're conscious as well. Fourth dimensional reality, fifth dimensional spirit realm. So they're talking about the multidimensional nature of vibration. And I always had the question for the Zetas, is everything actually separate? Because, people go, oh, three-dimensional, fourth dimensional, fifth, and so Arcturians.
It all sounds very separated.
And it all sounds very separate and actually horizontal, vertical, linear. But it's actually not like that at all.
Like a hierarchical.
There's no hierarchical structure with all these things. And I think also, this is the interesting thing, people make assumptions that because a being states they're from the 13th dimension, that somehow that being is better somehow than somebody from the 8th dimension. But it's actually not true at all.
Yeah.
And I guess you'd have to, that comes into the discussions based around, ethical considerations for a race. What are their belief systems? Do they even understand what physical realities are? And, so I don't believe that any of these conversations are simple or easy to have.
No, they're not.
But we sort of segued off a bit there and there.
And when we talk about different frequencies and states of vibration in regards to spirit realm and the astral, people will have who've listened to our videos and stuff, you will know that we use the radio analogy, right? So every different reality, call it what you like, is a different, represented by a different number on the band.
Yeah.
And it's just a question of everything is existing all in one, all
space,
at once.
Yeah.
But you have to dial in to each frequency to get to where you want to go.
And that comes back to what I was saying before about, let's say you've got fourth, which is astral, and fifth, which is spirit, but are they actually separate? Because at some point, if you drill right down to the very edge of the energetic fabric, and you keep going, you'll see at some point there's some conjoining fabric between all of these dimensions.
Well, it's just like turning from AM to FM, you hear a bit of fuzz, don't you? But it doesn't, when you're tuning from one station to another station, you hear it bleeding out, a little bit of fuzz, and then then it kind of tunes in as you go along.
If you've got one of the old ham radios,
Yeah.
Okay, next question.
Hang on, there's a question in the chat box.
Can the Zetas tell difference between an earthbound spirit and a higher vibrational spirit? The Zetas have no capacity to actually. It's an interesting question that you've asked there. The Zetas don't actually view spirits. That's the first thing. They have no desire to want to work with spirits at all. They're not interested in any level of spirit, like spirits, earthbound or whatever. And because of their frequency, spirits often fade away when the Zetas are around. Yeah. It's as though the amplification of their frequency is so strong that spirit people bleed away. I'll give you an example of this. Somebody was doing trance work, and a spirit was speaking through them. And one of the Zetas started speaking to me while the medium was trancing. And the spirit said through the medium, who didn't know that the Zeta was talking to me, "Oh, I'm losing contact and just faded away into the background as the Zeta came in stronger and stronger.
Well, that happens with you all the time. So, like, you know, okay, so we teach a staging process, right? When we're teaching mediumship, any type of mediumship. And so that means that we start with your spirit person if you're aiming towards extraterrestrial mediumship. I made something up there then. But with you, say the spirit guide is with you, they will realize when they are losing their grip on you,
right.
and they'll either say they have to go because they can feel that they must have some sort of recognition of the Zeta energy coming in.
It's like a pressure.
Yeah, or they
or
just fade away, and then a few minutes later the Zetas will start speaking.
Yeah,
so
that's normal.
I would suggest, although the Zetas can't tell the difference or are not interested in the difference between an earthbound spirit and higher vibration spirit, they would still acknowledge the behavior of any entity as being for a person's well-being or not.
I guess from experience, I would say that they are not concerned about the behavior of other beings.
Not at all.
No, not
unless. What about in we're having a conversation amongst ourselves now.
Yeah.
What about when you do have a spirit that's with you that doesn't have your best intention of heart, and they go against your free will?
The Zeta, that's got nothing to do with the Zetas, because the Zetas would say, well, that's your self being tested, that you have free will, that you have allowed this spirit person to come through you or to you for whatever reason. They would just observe what took place with the person.
Yeah.
I think people have this underlying belief that at some point extraterrestrials will just step in and take over and clean the mess up, not realizing that a lot of the races, observational races, they observe what's going on and learn from that, from the behaviors of humans. And so when a human gets themselves into some sort of whatever problem, they just observe what takes place. All right.
Interesting.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right.
Next question.
Can you give some examples of how different races, such as the Zeta, the Annorians, the Anunnaki, Arcturian, fit within the dimensional framework as we understand it?
Yeah. I would suggest that, firstly, nobody can contact source. All right. If a person says that they can contact source, that means that they haven't, because if they had, they wouldn't exist. Because to be source means to be outside of all of the dimensional and interdimensional frameworks, and even the levels of materialism and three-dimensional frameworks and all of the other spaces in between. When we talk about races, the first extensualized consciousness that I've met from source, because I said you can't talk to source, is the Annorians. And the Annorians are, if you try to go anywhere near them, you just disappear and probably would never come back. You can only observe them from a distance because of that space that they're in. They don't even exist in any of the interdimensional spaces.
Am I right in remembering you described them as void beings?
I call them void beings because of the fact that there are no structures that are relatable to any level of consciousness within the void.
That always makes me pause for thought.
We're all going, what? Yes, that's right.
All right. What about the Anunnaki? Where do they fit into this?
Anunnaki are really super interesting. The Anunnaki, they described it this way. I don't know whether it's true because I don't have the evidence to back it up, but they say that they have a multiphasic environment.
What does that mean?
Meaning that their planetary structure phases in and out of three-dimensional space,
according to
the Anunnaki.
No, but like what would cause it to fade in and out?
Phase
in
and out. I have no idea.
There's another question.
You see, this is the whole point.
I don't have a pen and paper.
The more questions that you ask,
I know.
You've got a video that you could watch.
Okay, I'll have to rewatch the video.
Watch the video.
Okay. All right. Hang on. Arcturians. We 8th dimensional. Is that what we go with there?
The Arcturians themselves have stated that they would make, if they had to be, sort of said, well, where are you?
Pigeonholed.
Yeah, put it where they said, well, I think from a humanistic perspective, you would talk about an 8th dimensional process, which leads into a lot of questions, because people go, oh yeah, the Arcturians are here, they have craft and all the rest of it. Yeah, okay, well, there's a lot to this, because if you are a three-dimensional craft, we'll say it's a UAP, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you want to move from point A to point B, you may need to dematerialize and heterodyne into a different frequency. We'll be talking about heterodyning after.
Mm-hmm.
And then reanimate yourself back into another three-dimensional space. I think that when people talk about all of these races, that their understanding that they have of the race, they place in like the box of humanity.
Yeah.
I have to understand this as being something, do you understand what I'm saying?
It's for conversational purposes,
yeah.
Isn't it? It's like you've got to have a basic understanding, even if it's crude. At least it's a start point to understand how humans fit into the wider framework. Now, there's a question there from John.
What is the very least one would need to do in order to present themselves in energy for group or personal communication with the Zetas?
That's a very good question.
I think the question is the other way around. If a person expected contact from a being, what does the being expect from the person? Because it doesn't matter what you do. If the being isn't there, they've gone. You could say every mantra in the world, you could meditate forever, but if the beings do not want to be observed, do not want relationship, then it doesn't matter what you do, they'll never turn up. Whereas the beings that turn up and evidence themselves, and this is very important, the ones that evidence themselves in ways that make sense, then of course they've turned up for a reason. Then when you learn how to do what's called heterodyning, or heterodyning is just a process, but when you learn about how to form relationship with the beings have already come to. I think what people do is they've made the assumption that using C5, go outside as a group, look up, see some lights, that somehow these beings just sit there and wait for them to come, not realizing that it's probably a level of group consciousness that creates the animation. It's like some reflection back to a person. It's just very interesting. I know that people want to contact, but understand it from their perspective. They have to want to be contacted by a person. And then the question is that they would ask, what do you want?
Yeah.
And if a person doesn't know, if they just make some sort of general statement, oh, I want to learn, they'll say, well, but you're already learning. But what do you want from us? And then they'll go, well, I want to learn about your race. Okay, well, what are you actually prepared to do to learn about that race?
Yeah.
Because you would totally underestimate what is expected of you to learn about a race.
It's never what you think.
Or else, it's never what you think. Or else these beings would be here working in amongst humans already.
Yeah.
But because they're not, it shows us that they're not prepared to actually work with humans at this point.
Yeah. John's question has reminded me of the time where the sitters in one of your circles were given the opportunity to try to present themselves in energy. Do you remember that?
Presenting themselves in energy.
Yeah. So the Zetas will ask in a sitting, what is your energy?
Yeah.
Right. Because they present themselves in energy. They don't say, hi, how are you? Shake a hand or have a hug or anything like that. They present themselves in energy. And so when we're speaking to them through you, they will ask us the same question. Now, humans don't present themselves in energy. So they had to find a way to get the information that they needed, which would be presented in energy, in a way that humans could manage. But there was one occasion where they did, one of the sisters did ask, what did they actually have to try to do?
And so then what happened was the Zeta said, well, okay, we've presented ourselves to you in energy. Can you sense us in the room? And the person said, of course we can. We can sense you in the room. We can actually see you as well. And then the Zetas said to the three people that stepped forward that wanted to try to present themselves in energy to do that. Well, when the people then tried to replicate the contact scenario between what the Zetas had done and what the people were going to try to do, I think the first person presented their etheric body, which the Zetas said that's not what they were asking. The next person presented some level of kinetic energy, which they said, no, that's exactly not what we were talking about at all. And then another person tried, and they're all trying. Nobody's saying that they weren't trying. They were trying to present themselves in energy, and the other person couldn't do it at all. And the Zetas just said that's so they could understand when they were asking the question that the humans didn't even understand what the question actually was.
Yeah.
So this is where the communication processes start to break down between extraterrestrials and humans. And when people say things like, oh, my ET or my whatever, I don't understand why people could say that, because the relationship between these races and humans is so difficult to understand. And I'll talk about a concept here called the terrain of contact. The terrain of contact is so difficult to navigate. If you're put into a place that's dark, you've never been there before, and all you can do is lean down and touch the ground, that doesn't mean that everything around you is what you're feeling on the ground. You have to navigate that terrain continually, that space around you, to work out where you are, because you can't see, you may not understand, you've not been there before. That's what we're all doing in contact with extraterrestrials, is navigating that terrain, because and we're providing ourselves with very, very limited imagery of what we believe contact is.
Talking of that, there's a question there. My eyes are so bad, I can't read who it's from. It says, I've done CE5, but what's next? And isn't that the problem with CE5? Let's just assume that the light in the sky actually was a craft, was an extraterrestrial craft, power up, flashing, whatever.
And now what?
And this is why we really don't advocate CE5. If it's an extraterrestrial craft at all, you're left with nothing, aren't you? I mean, you're just like, exactly, what's next? We teach
Heterodyning.
We teach heterodyning, which is what the Zetas taught Paul, and then Paul taught me as the pretty much, well, so far the only way that we know about that's a safe and evidenced way of actually connecting to your race. The key word there is your race. So the problem with CE5 is that if it really is an extraterrestrial craft or phenomena from a race, you can't even define which race it is. And as much as we all want extraterrestrial contact, there are races out there that really don't have our best interests at heart. And so, just like we advise people sitting for spirit mediumship to be opening themselves only to their guides and loved ones in spirit, not all and sundry. We recommend that people wanting to do C5 strongly think about what it is they're actually attracting to them when they do these events.
That's a very good thing.
Yeah.
Audato has asked about a race, but I've never heard of them, and I don't know what evidence there is for that race to exist. So I haven't heard of them.
Okay.
Back to the questions, maybe?
Back to chapter 14. One of the first things that I was told through you from the Zetas, that there are many ways to exist, and that always stuck with me, that phrase. And so whilst we're talking about these dimensional frameworks that we're using to try and understand what's going on around us, humanity doesn't just exist in isolation. I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that just like humans, we're 3D, but we have a fourth dimensional emerging collective consciousness, or the astral realm, and some of us are able to purposefully enter into the astral realm, whereas the rest of us do it by mistake or quite naturally when we're asleep. That humans can do many processes of consciousness that are way beyond 3D. Like the Zetas, for instance, they describe themselves as fourth dimensional, but they have a multi-dimensional framework. The Arcturians, their level of, they're eighth dimensional, but that doesn't mean they're just restricted to eighth dimensional activities or however processes. That
so the thing
is far-reaching.
Okay, let's talk about how would a person or an entity in the eighth dimension evidence themselves?
Well, that's a very good question, isn't it?
Okay, so we've got an eighth dimensional entity that's non-physical, and they need to evidence themselves to a third dimensional person. Well, what you have around you is a etheric body, right? But you then also have a fourth dimensional space, which is astral. What they can then do is to change, manipulate that fabric or that substance around you to create phenomena. And it could be something like the speeding up or the slowing down of time.
Or the moving of sound.
And we can go into this a lot more if people would ask questions about it. But there's a lot to evidence from beings. And just saying, I just feel the being with me, that's not evidence. It could be any energy that's with you. That these beings will be able to do things in the fabric of the energy around you that's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
And we'll be talking about this, I think, next week when we're talking about apportation, ectoplasm, and dematerialization.
Yeah.
Right.
Trish is asking, how would the Annorians evidence themselves?
I don't believe that they can. That's the difference. I think what happens is that you need to use a process called transitive trust. So a person or an entity comes to you and they evidence themselves really heavily to you to the point where you're satisfied that it's them. That's the first thing. They then introduce you to another being. Now, because you have a level of trust with the first being, and then they bring you another entity, that entity treats you in a way that's kind, compassionate, and loving. You never have any problems. The transitive trust that you have with sort of B, the person B or entity B, comes from the fact that you have a relationship with the race being A. And this is where contact with beings is very, very tenuous at best. And I would suggest that actually, if you ask a person about what they know about a race, they may have just read it on the internet. But if you say from your own personal experience, what is it that you know about a race, or what is it or evidence that you have gained yourself from a race, you'd have to suggest that probably the best level of evidence that people get is from spirit people.
Oh God,
because spirit people are able to give you levels of evidence that's absolutely stunning.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that they once lived as human beings and all the rest
It's
of
much, much easier.
Yeah, unless of course you are talking to a being, extraterrestrial, and they go, "Oh yeah, no problem, we'll land a craft," and they just drop one on top of your house. Well, then of course it's pretty good evidence, isn't it? Really? So
It's a big insurance claim.
yeah. So the thing is that when they talk about interdimensional entities, there are ways that they will come up with. It's not up to the person to go, well, look, if you do this for me, I'll believe in you. It's more about saying to the entity, well, you need to come up with ways where you're going to evidence yourself to me that proves to me fairly conclusively that you are who you are. And if you don't do that, well, then you can expect that you'll be treated accordingly. Actually,
Yeah.
all right,
Yeah.
all right. So I think we've talked about enough about that chapter.
Hang on, stop scrolling.
Stop scrolling. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, the only other thing we were going to mention in terms of this whole dimensional framework business was that this is something that I cottoned on to about a year ago. I had a little epiphany when we were doing a live thing, which kind of threw the whole frameworks that we work with, the whole 3D, 4D, 5D into complete oblivion, was that the fact that your perception of a dimensional framework can only be perceived within it. So although we are 3D, nice and solid, if you're in spirit realm, looking at us, to them, we look like we're translucent or light. We don't look solid at all.
That's right.
Just as when we see spirit people, to mostly they are looking. I mean, I know you see them as 3D physical people, but the vast majority of people don't see them like that.
No, I see them objectively. So a spirit person is called subjective, where you get information internally. And objective is that the imagery is so strong it seems to project into the physical reality, and you can't tell the difference. So that's whether they're there or not. But I wouldn't suggest that if I said, "Oh look, there's a spirit person standing there," you may go, "I can't see them." That's because it's subjective.
Or I just see them as a little light or something. Yeah. But the point is, in spirit realm, they are existing just as we're existing here. But of course, they see us differently. It's like when you go out of body. If you're in the astral, you may well perceive yourself as solid. So although to us we can't generally perceive the astral realm from this 3D reality, so the perception of your volume is really dependent on which dimensional framework you are within.
Okay, and
there you go.
There'll be an exam after this. So yeah. All right. So let's move on to chapter 15.
Okay.
Finally, because heterodyning, I think, is much more interesting.
Yeah, and that's been an evolving topic, hasn't it? When was heterodyning first mentioned in the primer? Was it back in 2013, or did it come in on a later edition?
I believe that it was actually then, because it was somebody said, "Listen, there's a process called heterodyning. If we used that word, do you think?" And of course, we had to discuss what that word meant. We needed to build some level of framework around conversation to actually understand what the Zetas were trying to say. And so the word heterodyning was brought up as a concept. But heterodyning is not the process. That's the difference.
Heterodyning is actually a state, to be in a heterodyne state. Two conjoined frequencies, one from somewhere else, one from somewhere else. They come together, they meet in the middle.
Somewhat akin to binaural beats, but exactly not binaural beats. All right, so it's got nothing to do with binaural beats.
Okay.
Heterodyning is a massive subject.
Yeah.
And
it's one we teach.
It's one we teach, but the thing is I believe anybody can learn to heterodyne.
Yeah.
Yeah, anybody can. And as the Zetas say, beware of technology. You've got all of your own abilities and consciousness. develop your own abilities and be that person that you're meant to be, which is your point of origin entity and your higher self.
Okay, so how does it relate to vibration and frequency in the context of chapter 14 and 15?
So a person wants to make contact with extraterrestrials. All right. The first thing that they need to do is understand that you're going to be moving through frequency to contact another being. Um, to do that, it means that you have to understand your own energy, because if you don't understand your own energy, you're never going to understand the difference between your energy and the other being's energy. And the very poor analogy is that if you have an oven in your kitchen and it's turned on but there's no food in it, when you open the door, you'll feel the heat from the oven come out, right? But if you then put a pizza in the oven and open the door, you'll smell the pizza come out, but of course the heat will still be there as well. Now, we do use that analogy for evidencing sort of spirit contact and personality and those sorts of things. But you have to understand the difference. And so with heterodyning, that's just a word that is a framework for discussion, which talks about you understand your energy, you use some specific processes that relate to the training that you're given by yourself, to yourself. And then once you understand the difference between your energy and what exists apart from you, which could be the heat or the smell of the pizza or whatever, that's then means that at some point there'll be a meeting of those frequencies. That is called a heterodyne state, but that's where contact actually is step one. Yep, that's step one of contact. Because with all the best intention in the world, if you meet a being and they do not know what the human language is or any of the human languages, you may see them, they'll observe you, but you'll never communicate with them. And it's quite often people that are having contact and they say they're being abducted, but they're having contact, will see these beings and even say to them, "Oh, please talk to me," or have some sort of narrative with me, but will be totally ignored by the beings, because it's as if you're speaking to a dolphin or something. You don't understand them really, and they probably don't understand you unless you're a trainer. And so, of course, the best that you can hope to do is to be in each other's presence at the same time, and that's observe each other. So heterodyning is actually quite an extensive and long process to learn, but it's actually quite effective.
Yeah, like you said, it has multiple stages involved, and then once you get to that state, there are then things that need to happen afterwards. We teach it over 6 months. It's not a quick process. Yeah.
Well, yes, it's not like a drive-through where you can just, I'll have an order of heterodyning, thanks to go, with a side of chips. Not going to happen.
No.
Okay.
Chips. Questions?
Do you want to continue down?
Yeah.
Okay.
Constraints and limitations to the heterodyning process.
Heterodyning, remember we said it was step one. So, of course, after heterodyning, there's gateway experiences, and I know that was asked before. But it's not a heterodyne state that is the gateway. It's the heterodyne process that then aided you to move through to the gateway process. The gateway process, and not gateway as in Monroe Institute, but gateway could be a multidimensional gateway where you then go through and meet other beings as well. And all the way through that, you need to understand your own energy and understand the difference, but also hold the dissonance as well. And the dissonance is the difference.
Okay. Do you want to talk about that?
I think it's too technical.
Okay.
I just think it's too technical.
What about risks and side effects associated with the process?
Yeah, absolutely. Of course there are. If you heterodyne outside of your construct space, then you are going to have an issue. So I'll give you an example. A person has never done trance before, and they then go into an altered state and have an experience with a spirit person, and then afterwards they feel very unwell because of that. And it we've been around training a lot of mediums for many years. It's very common to be a little unwell or extremely unwell, depending on what's happened after contact. And the same thing applies to our extraterrestrials. But the difference with the extraterrestrials is that because of the mind-to-mind contact, what will take place is that you can become out of sync with yourself, and vibrationally you could become you could feel you become unwell after contact as well. And I think that you'll find that there's literature to support the fact that people that do get contacted quite often have problems with their immune systems, can be burnt or irradiated after contact as well. And I think that these levels of problems that are associated with contact are completely underestimated. Completely underestimated.
Except by the beings themselves. They know the problems of contact, which is generally why people these days are contacted if they're going to be in their dream states, because it's a lot less it's just a lot easier for so many different reasons. There's less side effects associated with contacting somebody in their dream
Think
state.
about this. So Dr. Gary Nolan, we talked about Dr. Gary Nolan a fair bit. He's been doing a lot of research in regards to contact with some of the pilots, and those pilots have suffered some damage in regards to contact. And of course, we know that there's documented cases of people that have gone near craft that have been burnt as well. Often, with the training I had with heterodyning, I would be burnt.
Every time.
Burnt every single time. And it was quite an arduous task to stick with it, because
you were very unwell for days
afterwards the contact. And so when people go, oh yeah, my ET says this, I'm like, I don't understand. I mean, it doesn't mean it's not possible, of course it is, but I would then suggest, okay, well, if the ET says this, then the ET should be able to land a craft, or get the ET to land the craft, or do something with other people
something
around,
significant,
with somebody else around, because if they don't do that, it could be just a trickster spirit, which is what happens many times. These spirits, they love it. They know people want ET contact, and they're like, yeah, I'm an ET. I'm from planet X, and I've come to work with you. And they're laughing all the time when they do. It's pretty interesting.
And there's a comment there saying it's...
Do any of the 9 gate races lead to physical planets that are inhabited by the races? Yes, they do. Absolutely. And a lot of these, the gateway, if you're talking about the gateway, planets are actually populated with humans that are actually hybrid humans, but from a true hybrid nature, a physical hybrid nature.
And for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about there,
well, they're talking about the hybridization of this planet, which we say isn't happening.
Not biologically.
But of course, once we bring the gateway into the conversation,
that changes the subject.
It changes everything.
And there's more information on the gateway, the gateway, or Spirit Realm 2.0, as it was termed at one point. On our website, if you go to zetaconnection.com, you'll see that there's a whole little tab about the gateway. You can read about that. Someone comments that it's all a bit intimidating and contact is frustrating. Yes. Anyone who thinks it's a walk in the park has got no idea.
I'd say that contact...
It's been really, really, really difficult.
I would say that contact is about you being tested.
The entire time.
If you're not being tested through everything that you do in contact, the beings aren't real. And the reason is because from their perspective,
or they're something else. They're not genuine extraterrestrials.
But the beings themselves, they're like scientists. They're observing behaviors, and because of that, they perform things that create constructs around humans. So, and they watch how the humans interact and act within that construct. The constructs become more and more difficult to decipher,
or discern,
and that is training for you. So you're actually being trained by them to actually associate with them. And so it's the testing process that they're putting you through is the training mechanism for them to make contact with you.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
Yeah. You just, and you highly unlikely to recognize that at the time.
Yeah.
Trish says there, so if contact is easy, it's not contact. Well, it may well be contact, just not with who you think it is. Yeah. So, you know, we've seen spirit people on multiple occasions pretending to be extraterrestrials.
Yeah.
We've seen reptilians pretending to be spirit people and other races. In fact, the reptilians are very, very good at pretending to be other races, and so this is why you have to ask for evidence.
One thing I will say about the reptilians is their ability to manipulate the astral is
phenomenal.
Infinitely phenomenal. It's the way that they can actually project themselves through walls and look like something else, which you and I have both seen them do, is really interesting, and they have a very, very good grasp of the astral.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though they don't exist in the astral, they only exist in the astral as an intermediary process to the three-dimensional space.
Yeah.
Because they exist themselves physically as well. All right, so you're going to go back to some more questions? Or else this show is going to go for 3 hours, so we need to...
Okay. Are there specific conditions or prerequisites necessary for successful heterodyning to occur?
Yes, of course there are.
Do elaborate.
Oh boy. Well, Syann alluded before to the staging process. So the staging process means it's like a aircraft taking off. It's got to taxi along, it gets to a certain point, it's given permission by the tower to take off. They then power it up, do whatever they need to do. They take off under certain conditions. Heterodyning is exactly the same because ultimately you need to know your own energy. That means that you have to have a gatekeeper, and the gatekeeper has to be the first entity to give you a point of direction. You then set the intention. You then use different processes to create that vibrational space. You seek to heterodyne, but as we said before, if there's nobody there to heterodyne to, you can heterodyne all you want, and you'll get nowhere because there's no being. Yeah, and you will be by yourself. That's what'll happen. It'll be a nice space, but you'll still be there by yourself.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the beings may go, okay, this is great. You've done everything properly. You've heterodyned. We're here. Hello. And then they go, now the tests begin.
Yeah.
And you go, okay, what does that mean? They go, well, let's do some...
tell you.
Let's not tell you, but what about if this situation occurs? The next thing you know, you've got missing time. And you've got no idea how to work out how to see through the test. Yeah. The other thing is that you could be in what's called a synthetic quantum environment. And that's a very, very big subject, SQEs. And if you have read the primer of the Zeta race, you'll understand what the SQEs
I wonder what chapter number that is.
Oh boy, that's a big, big subject.
I'm quite looking forward to that.
Yeah,
we've had some awesome experiences in SQEs. It's been brilliant. Anyway,
someone says, "Are the reptilians sneaky?" Yes,
very sneaky.
Okay,
they're very naughty.
Okay. All right. So basically, what about any of those questions? This is where you have a cup of tea, the kettle on, get a biscuit, make a sandwich.
All right. Can heterodyning be used to access higher levels of consciousness or non-physical realms?
That is a really good question.
That's why I picked it.
So can it be used to access higher realms? Well, it's like the plane analogy. So they've taken off, but the thing is everything has to be working perfectly, hopefully, for the acceleration, the drag and the lift, for the plane to go up. I'm not a aerodynamics person, but you are. And of course, it goes up. Now, of course, it has to reach a certain level, doesn't it? Because it's been told that it has to be at a certain level. Yes, you can get to a certain level using those processes, but heterodyning requires staging, because guess what has to happen? A plane has to land. And so does a person who's having correct contact with extraterrestrials. You can't just go up and stay with extraterrestrials. You'll have to come down at some point to your grounded state to retain what's called your construct. And your construct is a representation of your higher self, but in a three-dimensional space.
There's a few comments there. It's a random one. Have you ever time traveled?
Oh boy. Yes.
Yeah.
Next question.
I did once, but it was within the astral, and I wonder do you think there's a difference there? Do you think it's possible for us to time travel in this here and now on this timeline, or do you think time travel only happens within the astral?
I think that time travel has 3 ways to do it.
Okay.
The first way is to do it in consciousness. The second way is to do it in a heterodyne state with a guide who is an extraterrestrial, because their technology will aid you in doing that. And the third way is for the reversed engineering technology that's being used by Montauk and the Philadelphia experiment.
Oh, don't get excited about the
Don't go talking about that with me, because we'll be talking for another hour. To do time traveling. And so the problem is you've got to work out that there are too many paradoxes, firstly, with time travel, but also you've got to ask yourself, are you on the correct timeline? How did you get to that timeline? How do you get back from the timeline that you're on? And if you don't know how to do that or reconcile that, then of course you've got a problem straight away.
I need another cup of coffee now.
Now you need another cup of coffee.
Okay. All right. Let me go back to these questions.
Would the Zetas let me fly one of their craft? No. No. That's a great question.
I want to fly a craft.
Yeah, we all want to fly a craft. So you walk on board to say one of the smaller craft, let's say 20 beings. You've been on one with me as well. And next thing you know, you look around, there's 3 or 4 beings managing, sort of multidimensional symbols and consciousness and all the rest of it. They're not giving, there's no steering wheel, and they're not giving me control over that craft, because we'll just we'll slam straight into a planet. Oops. So what they did was they allowed us to use a little drone, and the drone was only 9 meters across or something. Yeah. And I was given, I think, half an hour of training.
You were actually given 2 sessions. Yeah. And the first one you completely forgot it when you came back round. All you remembered is that you were shown some things, and that you just couldn't remember anything.
I'm just like, no, so this poor craft. I mean, I was just like, no.
We actually got a photograph over it. You brought it down over the back there, and we were able to take a photo of it in a semi-materialized.
Yeah, it was in a dematerialized state, but we still got a picture of it. And we showed it to people. People go, it's really hard to see.
It's like, we know, but it was there, and sent the animals around the properties. Absolutely insane for 3 days. The birds were crashing into the windows. Yeah. We nearly lost the plot, and in the end, we had to send it back.
When the craft were around, the birds fly into the windows.
Yeah, it's actually quite distressing, isn't it? It's not very nice.
I think that happens to lots of people.
Yeah. Anyway,
have you ever been offered to be an ambassador for an alien race? No, never. And I'll tell you that there is nobody, not one single human, that is an ambassador for any race on this planet. I know that people are saying that they're ambassadors.
They'd like to
that
be.
They would like to be ambassadors, but from our level of contact with different races,
they don't need an ambassador.
They don't need an ambassador. They don't want an ambassador. And every time I've seen anybody be pronouncing themselves as an ambassador, it's been quite obvious that the person is not an ambassador, because the beings have worked out that to isolate one human and give them control and power is a big
really
problem.
Bad idea. Yeah.
So what they do is they decentralize their contact. As you notice, when you read about contact, there's all these people being contacted.
Yeah.
That's because they've decentralized the contact process, and they don't require or want any ambassadors.
Yeah. There's at least a minimum of 30% of the people on this planet are hybrids of consciousness, and that is the way it is, because they didn't want any one person to have access to everything. So
could you imagine somebody makes you an ambassador for the race, and then you're stuck between the whole of the human species on the planet and another race, and next thing you start getting ethical consideration issues. You think that you're making all the right ambassador type moves for one planet, and it turns out you're making all the wrong moves. You're talking to, it's like you're now on a committee and you've got to discuss everything with everyone. I just don't believe that it works.
Is that at all? Sue says that's another reptilian trick.
Yeah.
Yes, and anyone who thinks they're really very important that they should be an ambassador has probably got a reptilian hanging around.
It's so laughable.
Anyway,
I think if somebody offers to make me an ambassador, I'd tell them, listen, just go away. Because
we've been. If the Zetas ever said anything like that in a sitting, I'd just be like, you're not who you are.
Yeah,
go away.
Go away.
Absolutely.
Sure. All right.
All right. What do we got left? What role?
John wants to be the ambassador for the Earth. John, you can have that job.
Good luck.
And what you could also do, John, is you could solve all the problems on this planet before you go and talk to the extraterrestrial. Oh, sorry. He said he wouldn't want. Oh, okay. Yeah.
Oh, poor John. That's awful.
Oh, okay.
You just designated him a role he didn't want.
Well, he said he would, and he goes, wouldn't. No way. That's it. All right.
No, very sensible. Okay, listen, we need to get back to these questions, or we're never going to get anywhere. Okay, I like this question. What role does heterodyning play in bridging the gap between different states of consciousness and facilitating communication from beings from other dimensions, which is very relevant to what we're discussing? What role does heterodyning play in facilitating communication between us and other races?
You know, that is a really, really interesting. It's a big question. The reason I'm stopping right there is because I'm thinking about all the different facets of contact.
Yeah.
I'll give an example. I know people in this room, in this chat room. I know that there's one person in that room that's walked out onto their balcony and then seen extraterrestrial things happening, and you know who you are, and that was not a heterodyne state, although they were placed into a heterodyne state by the beings, because they probably ended up with some sort of level of missing time, which means that they are based in a construct. And this is why we talk about all of the different screen memories, because if you don't understand the different screen memory technologies, you can't understand what the tests are. And this is why if you understand that these beings are observing, and through the observation process, they're also testing, you may find that, I'll give you an example, you've stepped out onto a balcony, a veranda, you see a craft, next thing you know, you're in an anesthetized state. Now, from a level of making decisions, correct decisions, if you're in an anesthetized state, somebody may be told, you need to go outside, or you're inside and you need to go outside. You just get up and go outside. You don't know why you went outside, but you were told that you needed to go outside. It seems that on some level, you lose control of your ability to make those very, very clear, crisp decisions in contact. So with heterodyning gives you a much more controlled level of staged contact, because there's no requirement for them to anesthetize a person.
That's right. Yeah, like when they come here, say overnight, and I'm sure many contactees and people listening will know, you wake up, they're in the room, and then generally you black out after about 30 seconds. Now, if you don't black out, you may have some crazy experience, but it's not one you've got any control of, or you have any understanding of what's going on. Generally, I find I've got about 30 seconds to a minute to get into a position to be able to heterodyne. Otherwise, I black out. The communication with them,
you're talking about they've turned up,
comes from being able to get to that state where they can actually have some level of communication with you, but it's such a short time frame you've got.
It's about 3 seconds.
Well, I think they're very I think they're a bit more patient with me at the moment. I'm around the 30-second to a minute mark.
There's some questions there.
I know.
Are you able to heterodyne at will? That's an interesting question, because I think that people believe that they can.
It's not instant.
I don't believe it's instant. It's a process, and as long as you understand that it's a staging process, then yes, you can heterodyne at will. But heterodyning isn't like that.
No.
Heterodyning is a process, and because heterodyning is a process for contact, there are ways to shortcut the heterodyning process. It's like, I'll give you an example. Someone gives you a couple of eggs, some flour or some chocolate, whatever, and says make a cake. You've never made a cake in your life, and an hour later it just collapses in the oven and it's all over, right? But somebody who is really good at making cakes, eggs, everything in, it's all done, and they've taken all the shortcuts in the world to get there, because they knew what they were doing and they knew how all the ingredients mixed together to create the cake. So I'd suggest that the more you do heterodyning, the better you get at it, and the faster you become as well.
I'd suggest it's some sort of energetic memory response at some part as well. Just like a musician, say a violinist, spends hours and hours and hours learning a very long piece of music. After a while, they get what they call muscle memory in their fingers, and they're able to get those notes very, very quickly. It's, if they hadn't have done all the practice, that was never ever going to happen, but they've done the practice and it happens. Same as a marathon runner. If they don't train, they're not going to be able to run a marathon, are they? So I think with heterodyning, it's a similar process. You do it, you keep doing it, and you keep doing it, and years later you still are doing it. And if you stop doing it, say you've had a couple of weeks off, it takes longer to get back into it. It's not something you can just immediately. It's not like just riding a bike where you just can get back on again and go.
It's true. I think that it's some sort of energetic process, and you need to. I'll give you an example, bad one, but it's a balloon, and you blow the balloon up, and then you don't bother to tie a knot, and so you walk away, and the balloon goes down. So with heterodyning, you need to always be applying pressure to the balloon to try to keep it up at a certain level of pressure. If you don't do that, it slowly goes down, and then when you go back to use it again, what happens is you go, I was able to get to the gateway last time, and now you can't. And you go, well, that's my own fault, because I didn't sit and heterodyne with as much as I needed to.
Okay.
So, but there are questions that are
look at the time.
up.
All right. Go on, you're nearer. You can.
There's a question there about astral traveling and hitting a brick wall. Astral traveling isn't easy. I know some people are natural at it. Other people have to try. But every human astrals every night. But to astral consciously can take time. I would suggest that the best time to try to astral is 3 hours after you get up in the morning, and to make sure it's a very quiet space.
Yeah.
All right.
What do the Zetas sound like?
They click. There's lots of clicking when the Zetas are around. And of course, that doesn't mean that every click or static noise that is around you is a Zeta.
Yeah, spirit
people also make static noises and clicking noises as well. By the way, we've got another channel called The Spirits channel.
Yeah, we're getting to that, aren't we?
We're getting to that.
Yeah.
And we're going to be teaching a lot of information about spirit contact on that. But it's only just started. It's only got a couple of videos.
Yeah.
All right.
Julia, how do you
modulate your frequency when you heterodyne, breathwork and harmonics? There you go. Does it become reflexive?
Is it reflex?
Is it reflex? It probably is.
It's like what we said. It's like the practice. The more you practice, the more easily you can do it.
Yeah. So another person says, I'm looking forward to reading the primer. Yes, but you can also download the Zeta interviews as well. Yeah, and that's only 700 pages. All right.
I just really like reading.
And there's lots of information in there as well. I would suggest, though, that, there's nothing like experience, is there? So if you can read about mountain climbing all you want, but if you've never actually done it, you're not going to be a very good mountain climber. But a person that's mountain climbed for years, they know many of the tricks of the trade in regards to staying alive, which is really important.
There's a question from Victoria, but I can't read it.
You may have gone over this already, but how do you heterodyne and what are the goals throughout the process? Are they revised over as the process goes on?
It's a 6-month process that we teach, but the reality is that if you just need to keep practicing. If you don't do your practice every day, then don't bother, basically. It took me 15 years to get about 20 minutes of contact. Now we have refined teaching the process. We can get somebody going after 6 months. It's a long process.
I think the best way to describe heterodyning is this, right? So,
Trish, I do need another coffee.
A truck rolls up at a block of land. You're going to build a house, okay? And you don't know how to build a house, but all the bits and pieces arrive, all the bolts, the nails, all the timber, all the machinery, and you spend years trying to learn how to build this house, and probably it'll just fall down in the end under its own weight. Whereas a master builder will look at all of the things that are available and create a beautiful home off a plan, and the plan is given to them by the owner, and in this situation the owner is the race. The race know what you need for contact, and it doesn't matter how much people try to contact beings if the person doesn't understand their point of origin, where they came from in the beginning and what race they're associated with. You can heterodyne as much as you want and you'll still never meet a being because the beings do not want to be observed. That's what it comes down
Victoria's
to.
asking, is there an alternative to heterodyning? Well, it depends what your end goal is. If your end goal is one of common sense, that you want an evidenced connection to your own race that you can trust and rely upon to be in your best interests, then I'd suggest no, there isn't.
You could always just ask them to land a craft.
Yeah, but that's still not going to teach you communication, is it?
No.
If you want communication with spirit people, then you don't need to learn how to heterodyne because they work in a different way. If you don't care who you end up in contact with, then just sit there and ask for it, and I'm sure it will come. But who comes?
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. So it's a long process, and it takes a lot of commitment. But we teach a safe way to do it, and it's heavily evidenced, so you can rely upon the information that you're getting. It's not from a spirit person, it's not from a race with an ulterior motive, and most importantly, it's not coming from your own subconscious brain, which is actually very, very powerful and probably responsible for most of the channelings we hear online.
So Julia's got a question there that says the heterodyning process is for all ET races, not just the Zetas.
Correct.
Actually, probably not really. So, okay, remember that, because heterodyning is a process, and there's a lot of parts to the process. And once, I'll give you an example. You're trying to heterodyne, and you're going to race A, and they're probably third-dimensional sort of beings, but they're 40 light years away, whatever. That's fine, but what if you're trying to heterodyne to your point of origin race that is eighth dimensional race?
Okay, I've got
you see what I mean?
your clarification.
So you need to do the staging process so that on your way up through the frequency that you know how to land the aircraft, that you know how to come back down. So heterodyning will get you to a certain place, but there's a process called piggybacking, and what happens is some races know how to get to other races. Just like in the movie Contact, they put her in the sphere, she drops down, she goes into the portal, and the actual conduit that she travels in was created by another race. And so basically the sphere was piggybacked through that to those beings.
Okay, so Julia's asking about the Arcturians. So the heterodyning process that we teach is a way for anyone working with their point of origin with us to create the environment for their race to come to them. So we only work with people who know their point of origin. And that's been determined by the Zetas, because then we have the dial home code to work towards. So we've got let's just say I'm the person learning, I know my race, I'm going to learn the heterodyning process to get me to a point A. And when I'm at point A, I know, because of the training we're doing, that my race is also working with me. Then my race is going to come and meet me at point A. So it's a universal way to gain connection to your own race, but it makes the assumption that your race is going to work with you, and that's what Paul does. We are working with the races in conjunction with the person. So it's a two-way process here. Now, if you were to just go and take the heterodyning process and just randomly use it, you don't know where your point of origin is, you don't even know if you have an extraterrestrial point of origin, then who knows what would happen. But we don't work like that. We will only work with people that the Zetas we know the Zetas are supporting.
So Julia's question is, how does my race know I'm trying to contact them? Do I let them know? That's very interesting, because when we're teaching heterodyning, we build what's called a synthetic quantum environment. We put the students into the SQE, and that is done externally. And then what happens is that the Zetas view the students inside the synthetic quantum environment. They can see the energetic signature that is associated with each of the hybrids. They then bring their race to us, and at the same time, so that person's race, say they're Arcturians, we get the Arcturians come. The Arcturians also go into the SQE with the person as well.
SQE.
So this is why when we talk about heterodyning and synthetic quantum environments and contact and that, remember, extraterrestrials are technically advanced races, and they use these methods of contact for humans. This is why people are using SETI and all these other technologies to try to send signals into outer space to get some level of response, not realizing that the beings are saying, we've got our own way to be contacted. Dial us in that way and we will respond to you.
Yeah. Trish asked, what if a person has 3 points of origin? But it's possible. Where
I don't believe that you'd have 3 points of origin. I believe that you would be, from just experience of working with hundreds of people, you'd have a spirit contact,
which everyone has,
which you do because that enlivens the physical form, and you'd have a point of origin from another race. The only way that there would be a third involved is if there was an agreement from the extraterrestrial race that they were going to piggyback another consciousness with them into a 3-dimensional space.
Now we've worked with
one person.
I think it's 2 out of probably nearing 100 people now determining their point of origin. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, actually only 2 people had two extraterrestrial point of origins. They're very, very unusual. And on both occasions, the Zetas specified the predominant race that they should focus their connection upon. It certainly wasn't both.
Yeah.
Phew.
Okay.
Are we done?
I think we're finished.
Hang on. Is that one last question? Is that what I've been, Julia? No, Julia, we haven't done that yet. That's actually next month. Check your Facebook messages, Julia. Okay, that sounds rather crowded. Yeah, it would be a bit crowded. It would be, yeah. Okay, right. We're finished. Okay, so next week we are back at this normal time, and we're going to be looking at chapter 18, which I think Paul mentioned earlier on, is about materialization, apportation.
We'll be talking about all the things that take place
Yeah.
as evidential processes from spirits and seances.
So that will go, it will cross over to spirit, a bit of spirit realm next week as well. So, yes, if you haven't already subscribed to our mailing list, you can do that just by popping onto the website
and subscribing.
Yeah. If you don't receive a mail out from us over a weekend, then check your spam box, your junk file box in your email. It's probably hiding in there. And if it's still not there, email us and let us know. All our contact information is all on our website.
I've started putting the blog posts or the emails out onto the Zeta Connection in Facebook.
It's Bob and Jackie. Hey, Bob and Jackie.
All right.
Thank you, everybody, for all your questions and your input. I don't know, there's quite a lot of people here. Do people want to pop onto a Zoom chat for 10, 20 minutes and just carry on the conversation? If you do, maybe just give me a quick thumbs up. Would people like to carry on the conversation on a Zoom chat just for a little bit? If I don't see any thumbs up, we'll leave it. We'll leave it. Going once. Going twice. Julie said yes. Nancy said yes. Okay.
So how do they get onto this Zoom chat?
Okie dokie. What I will do is if you go onto Facebook, onto our Facebook group, which is called the Zeta Connection, there is an associated chat with this series.
How many ways will this go wrong?
I will generate a Zoom link in a minute and I will just put it into the group. Okay. So yeah, look, there's a few people. We'll do that.
Yeah, I'm just waiting to see how this technically takes place.
If you can get to the Facebook group.
Now you're all being tested.
Yeah, this is a test. Get to the Facebook group and I'll put a Zoom link in there in a minute. Grab a cup of tea. And we'll see you in about 5 minutes. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
I'll see you soon.